Well, here we are with the last in our three-part deep dive into the Xbox One X's hardware. You can check out Part 1 and Part 2 via the links in the description below. The processor and GPU upgrades to the One X enable it to run games at 4K with performance levels broadly comparable to entry-level 4K hardware in the PC space. But there are two further pieces to the puzzle. First, how do you cope with the additional memory demands at 4K? And second, how do you make hardware that's built around offering a great 4K experience compelling to the still large audience of people with 1080p television sets? VRAM requirements in games have only increased of late. Whether or not developers are actually making use of the mammoth frame buffers is questionable though. As the owner of a 4K TV and a GPU with 4GB of VRAM that was supposedly built around 4K experiences, I most certainly do have an axe to grind here. Considering that the Xbox 360 and PS3 had a fraction of the amount of video memory on board the 8th gen consoles, the lower texture resolution in older games is quite understandable. With the advent of the 8th gen in 2013, developers suddenly had a lot more VRAM to play with. However, cross-gen titles fundamentally required assets to work on 7th gen titles without being excessively compromised. This led to an interesting situation, where texture work in many 2013 and 14 games was admirable while keeping VRAM usage to reasonable levels. Excessive VRAM usage in recent games is peculiar because the artwork's just not justifiably detailed for the amount of VRAM consumed. Titles like The Witcher 3 and surprisingly Assassin's Unity feature wonderfully detailed texture work on models and the environment, while keeping VRAM utilization at or around 3GB when running at 1080p. Even my heavily modded Skyrim installation runs just fine with Fury's 4GB of VRAM. Alas, in the past couple of years, with 8GB of VRAM becoming the tick box feature, VRAM usage has shot up with little to show in terms of enhanced quality. Fallout 4, with its 50GB HD texture pack, looks nowhere near as sharp as modded Skyrim. And of course, it stutters. Having run plenty of titles both at a native 4K and 1080p, there just isn't that great a difference in texture quality with newer VRAM-hungry titles. With 8GB of VRAM seemingly standard now, games appear to be using the extra memory primarily for caching, not for displaying objectively higher-res artwork. And of course, when scaling these titles up to 4K, VRAM requirements shoot straight through the roof. For better or for worse, this is the environment that the Xbox One X arrives in. Microsoft's inclusion of 12GB of VRAM on the Xbox One X is as much a matter of necessity as it is a marketing bullet point. Out of this 12GB, the GPU will be able to utilize up to 9GB at any given point. Do games really use up that much VRAM? Well, as it turns out, they do. On a GTX 1080, Deus Ex Mankind Divided used up all 8GB of VRAM. Fallout 4 uses over 6GB. The pattern's easy to see here, and that number's only going to go up. Furthermore, compared to the PC, the Xbox One X has a further limitation, and that is that its memory is a shared pool, accessed by both the processor and the GPU. While up to 9GB can be utilized by games at a given point, in practice, increasing RAM requirements will mean that 7 to 8GB at most will be available at a given time. Whether or not the way VRAM is being utilized in an optimal way in today's games, the Xbox One X has enough to offer the top-tier PC experience in terms of texture quality, and this is a meaningful edge over the PlayStation 4 Pro. The Pro has 5.5GB of memory available to games in total, which means less than 4GB of video memory in practice. This is a real problem at higher resolutions. In PS4 Pro enhanced games, the Pro version features a significant bump to resolution compared to the original PS4, but texture assets remain identical between the two versions. The whole point of 4K is being able to resolve more detail. Simply scaling up 1080p assets doesn't do anyone any favors. In contrast, Forza Motorsport 7 on Xbox One X was eye-opening and showcased textures that are in line with PC's highest settings. With VRAM requirements increasing, the Xbox One X's 9GB of addressable video memory will play a crucial role in enabling the system to offer a convincing 4K experience in a world where 8GB PC graphics cards are increasingly common. Moreover, with memory bandwidth scaling with resolution, the bump to 326 gigabits per second of bandwidth will help prevent bottlenecking at 4K, enabling the One X to hit the crucial 30 FPS update when running games at 4K. The second question we're looking to answer is just as important, though it's a matter of functionality more than hardware capability. 4K is clearly here to stay. 4K TV sets experienced a 105% growth rate in 2016, and as of May this year, 16% of US households own a 4K TV. The flip side to this, of course, is that 84% of US households don't. 1080p is still where it's at for the next couple of years. While the Xbox One X is positioned as a product meant to address the 4K audience, it'd be downright foolish not to offer value added for people still gaming on 1080p TVs. Moreover, at the end of the day, low-level optimization aside, that 6 teraflop GPU and custom Jaguar processor are not much more powerful than an RX 480 paired with something like an FX 6300. This imposes hard limits on just how much the One X can accomplish at 4K as games become increasingly complex. Lower resolution options, right down to 1080p, are critical for the One X to remain a viable gaming platform into the early 2020s. The PlayStation 4 Pro adopts a less than optimal approach to 1080p. Its boost mode utilizes just half the GPU cores, albeit at a slightly higher core clock, offering around 14% better frame rates in GPU-bound situations. In titles that are CPU-bound, the uplift in frame rate is greater, but still, at the end of the day, the vast majority of PS4 titles are frame rate locked, and boost mode just enables titles to run at the frame rate that they really ought to on the base hardware. In terms of supersampling, Sony puts things in the developer's hands. Some studios do offer a great deal of value add at 1080p. Some games that support the PS4 Pro feature a performance mode with an unlocked frame rate, as well as a mode that enhances visual settings, bringing visuals more in line with the maxed out PC version at 1080p. Supersampling is also on the table for a flawless image quality. The caveat here, however, is just that. It's up to the developers to enable supersampling and high frame rate modes on the PS4 Pro, and many opt not to bother, which is ridiculous considering that a game downsampled from 4K would perform exactly the same as it would at native 4K. The Xbox One X offers support for supersampling right out of the box. While it's debatable as to whether this is an ideal use of GPU resources, at the very least it ensures that gamers at 1080p have convincingly enhanced image quality over the base hardware. Moreover, the One X offers a boost mode of sorts as well, making higher or more consistent frame rates an option. The One X's increased memory pool and enhanced support for 1080p displays rounds out the console's capabilities, ensuring that just about everyone will have a meaningfully better experience on the One X. We're usually very leery about console hardware, but from what we've seen, the Xbox One X appears truly positioned to offer the kind of compelling 4K experiences that have been exclusively remit of high-end PCs until recently. Let's see how things pan out in November.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at Gaming Vault, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.